Thank you. So we'll start with a kickoff, and I'm very happy to see so many people joining our virtual session on this topic on the future food trends. We are very excited that you can join us. And for those who doesn't know, Kickstart Innovation, we are an open leading platform, innovative platform, and we are based in Switzerland, and we are working globally with, So we are based in Switzerland, and we aim to foster sustainable partnerships between corporations and global startups which are addressing innovative solutions to our partners' challenges. How we do this is in the forms of POCs or commercial agreements. Basically, we work in 7 different areas. We work in the areas of food and retail tech, fintech and insurtech, edtech and new work, smart city and technology, health tech, entrepreneurship, and circular economy. Up to date, we have accomplished about more than 170 deals, and we have over 270 alumni that have raised more than 1.5 billion francs. Every year, we receive startups from all around the globe, and we have a network of about 500 partners. Today, we are talking about the future of food, and I would like to introduce you to Suzanne, the lead at the food and retail tech area at Kickstart, who is with us today. And over to you, Suzanne.
Thank you so much, Regina. Welcome to everyone and still people joining. Very excited to have you all of you with us here today. Regina, if you might be able to show people the slide of our lovely speakers that we have here with us today. I'll go over a bit of housekeeping rules first, and then I'll let them introduce themselves to you as well. So a little bit of housekeeping before we actually kick off. So we'll start with an intro of everyone. We'll have a quick panel discussion, and then we'll have some time for Q&A afterwards. So if you have any questions for any of the speakers, please pop them into the chat, and we will get to them at the end of the session. So probably about the last 20 minutes, depending on how long the discussion goes on for. So there we go. And maybe the next slide. There we go. These are our lovely speakers. And then lastly, the session is being recorded, just to have everyone be aware. So Regina already introduced me a little bit, but so I am the lead for the food and retail vertical within Kickstart Innovation. We have the chance here in the food and retail focus area to link some of the most innovative global startups with the selection of the biggest players in food and retail in Switzerland and beyond. We work with global startups all over the world, so very exciting. In that process, there are a few trends that we have seen and that we continue to see through our work within Kickstart. And so maybe to get the discussion going a little bit or get a little bit of a warm up, I figured I would give you a few that we've seen recently and that we're expecting to continue in the next few years. So one of them would be the almighty protein alternatives, a personal favorite of mine, obviously, anything in terms of alternative for meat, seafood, dairy, etc. So plant-based, obviously, but increasingly so in fermentation, which you'll hear more about today, as well as developments in the cultured, cultivated, cell-based meat space. Then a second one would be anything clean label products, so organic, but also clean label in terms of the least amount of additives. People are looking for pure products, less processed, etc. Another big one we see is food safety, and tech relating to food safety, and also to enable the reduction of food waste. Very big one there. Then everything in terms of sourcing, both locally as well as sustainably. This goes both on an environmental level as well as on an ethical level. And then, and we have a few good examples of this in our current Kickstart finalist batch. You might want to have a look at the Kickstart Innovation website if you want to find out more. But we have a few very interesting startups in the finalist batch this year who are working on circularity and the upcycling of products. Very interesting stuff, and something that we see a lot more of, hopefully, in the next few years. And then the last one, I think, is not so much the food itself, but definitely food related, is everything basically sustainable packaging related. So there are certain particularly very big brands, which I won't name here because we're not trying to be an advertisement, but certain big brands are even testing out fully plant-based plastic at this time. So I think the needle is moving in the right direction. And I would love to hear more about our panelists' views today. So I'll hand over to Martin from Umiami. Could you tell us a bit more about who you are, what your company does, what sparked the idea to start your business, which trends, and which of those trends do you see happening in your industry right now and continuing for the next, let's say, year, 5 years, 10 years, maybe? Over to you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Suzanne. Thank you, Regina. So I'm really pleased to be here today. My name is Martin, and I'm a co-founder of Umiami. So we started Umiami actually with a simple observation, right? Which is that when you look at the animal protein that people consume, more than half of that are large, unprocessed pieces, right? For instance, a chicken breast, beef steak, a large piece of fish, of salmon, for instance. We call them whole cuts in our industry. Now, when you look at plant-based alternatives, I think someone is not on mute. Yeah, I think it's better. Yeah, and I was saying, if you look at plant-based alternatives, you'd realize that they're almost always minced or small pieces, right? So what you typically find are burger patties, sausages, meatballs, or small chicken pieces. So there is basically this huge gap, right? And you might wonder why that is the case. And the reason is actually pretty easy. It's because technologically, it's extremely hard to recreate the complex fiber structure with the fibrous alignment of meat using plant proteins. And so that's a huge technological issue in our industry currently. And that's the one that we're tackling and that we're aiming to solve at Umiami. So, I mean, I won't bother you too much with all the technical details. I aim to keep this presentation short. But basically, I think all you need to know, to give you a little bit of context, is that when it comes to plant proteins, almost everyone in this industry uses the two same technologies. They're called dry extrusion and wet extrusion. And these two technologies, they just don't allow to recreate those complex fibers that you have in meat. And so we created a unique process that for the first time allows to do so. For the first time allows to create really thick pieces, have aligned fibers. For the first time also allows to have vertical fibers, for instance, to mimic a beef product, for instance. And we do that in a very clean label way. So typically, you know, the only ingredients that we need are water, proteins, and then any other ingredient that you want to add, like spices, salt, flavors, meaning that, you know, in the end, you have no methylcellulose, no binding agent, no gums. You get like a very nice and clean label product. And I guess to finish that intro, you know, the last thing that you need to know about Umiami is that we're a fully B2B company, meaning that we're technology driven. And so we create unique products using our technology. And here on the screen, you can see an example of chicken produced using high moisture extrusion, which is, you know, currently on the market. And on the right, a chicken breast that is produced using our context. So we typically partner with existing companies that are consumer facing, and we focus on technology and production, and then they focus on marketing and everything that's consumer facing to bring the products to the market, right? And so today we're a company of about 13 people. We're currently building a factory in France. It's opening up in just a few months. It's brand new, so I'm very excited about that. And so to answer your question, you know, your questions around what are the biggest trends that I currently see in the industry? Well, I mainly see two, right? So I see a big trend towards whole cuts. Definitely, you know, everything around patties, burger patties, sausages, meatballs has been explored for the past 2-3 years. There are already very good alternatives out there. So, you know, consumers are expecting something else, and companies are heavily investing the space and trying to create other products. And then the second, you know, biggest trend that we see in this industry is that everything is moving so fast that we see companies really open up. So typically we see big corporates totally restructure their open innovation approach and starting to work with smaller structure, with also other bigger structures, so as to be faster, so as to really go to market at a pace that really allows to supply the demand. So those are like the two big trends that I currently really see on a daily basis in my job. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin. And thank you for your insights. I think next up we have Anne from Aquaculture Foods. Go ahead. I think you're still on mute, Anne.
Sorry about that. Thank you. So first of all, I'm just really excited to be here today and just share a little bit about what we're doing over at Aquaculture Foods. So again, my name's Anne Palermo, CEO and co-founder of Aquaculture Foods. What we are doing is creating really beautiful whole cuts of seafood alternatives. And how we're doing this is with a proprietary process of fermentation. It's allowing us to very remarkably and accurately replicate seafood and create these seafood analogs in terms of their appearance, texture, nutritional profile. So when talking about nutritional profile, one of the things that I really like to highlight is the fact that it is inherently very similar to the nutrition of cod. However, we're also able to very finely tune that nutritional profile. And some of the excitement about being able to tune it means that we're also using the same strains and the same method of production, able to change the texture of the seafood alternatives that we're creating. So, for example, we can have higher amounts of fibers would create a chewier texture and something that's more similar to calamari. And what we would then do is just tune down the amount of fibers and create a textural profile more similar to that of a cod or an ahi tuna. Something else that I want to highlight is just the fact that all of our products, they're whole grown, they're unprocessed, which means that they have a very short and clean ingredient deck or ingredient profile, which is very significant as a lot of our retail partners are seeing consumer pushback from highly processed foods with really high levels of sodium. Our products, because they don't have any of that, they're able to have a really clean deck on very, very high levels of protein, fibers, and micronutrients such as B12. So something else that I really want to add is the fact that the products are all inherently tasteless. And that at first may sound counterintuitive. You know, why would I want a product that doesn't, that is flavor neutral? Well, it's a huge benefit because when you're able to start at zero or start at a blank palette, you don't have to add in a lot of chemical masking agents, which means that we're not trying to fight against any off tastes. And so because of that, we're able to have a nice, delicate hand when it comes to adding our flavors, which is a huge benefit because, as we all know, seafood has a very delicate flavor profile to begin with. And so being able to gently add those flavors just means that we're really able to bring out and highlight the wonderful flavor profile of those seafood analogs that we're replicating. And now what really sparked my interest in starting this business is that once I heard about the fact that 2 billion more people are going to be born on the earth in the next 30 years, current levels or current methods of manufacturing food production, be it agriculture or animal husbandry, just really aren't able to sustain that kind of growth and demand on the food system. Something really has to change. And the best way to do that and to feed these next 2 billion people or global population of close to 10 billion is with alternative proteins. And what I really love about fermentation in particular is that we are able to create a nutritious, bioavailable protein product that can be close to or even sometime at scale surpass price parity. It's going to taste delicious and really be able to be readily available to the global population, which is something that has just gotten me so passionately involved in starting this company. And then when it comes to major trends that I see over the next 5 to 10 years, I think there's going to be a massive shift towards alternative proteins. I think it's going to come even, very, very quickly. If what has happened with alternative milks and dairies, for example, is any indication of what's going to happen to alternative proteins in the form of meats, seafoods, chickens, poultries, is that it's going to come fast and furious, and household penetration is going to be very high. So we are not only going to see this massive shift towards alternative proteins, but and I very much agree with Martin in that whole cuts of alternative proteins are going to become very, very relevant. And up until now, the only reason why they aren't seen as often is because they haven't really been as readily available. So this is something that Aquaculture Foods is planning to really bring to market and bring to market in a very strong way. We feel right now that the demand is already there for these types of alternative proteins. And again, by proteins, I'm talking beef, chicken, and of course seafood, as that's the area that we're talking in particular. And now it's just really up to the manufacturers to develop a product that the customer wants to eat, enjoys eating, and at a price where they can afford to eat it. That's all.
Thank you so much, and maybe we can move on to Alexandre at Givaudan. Maybe not so much what sparked the idea for your business, because I doubt that you founded Givaudan, although that would be fantastic. Maybe more on the trends globally, and maybe also in Switzerland that you see, what you do at Givaudan, and yeah, a little bit about what you see from your perspective.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Suzanne. So it's great to be here. We are so close to Kickstart Innovation, and it's just amazing to see all this ecosystem, evolving here in Switzerland. As you can see, I'm calling from our Zurich Innovation Center, and it's a place where we welcome everyone to come here and work with us. Actually, just this morning we had a fantastic session with another startup and tasting, and it's amazing. I was just reflecting on that. You go again on the wow effect, and it's like, I can't believe I can actually taste that. And when you think about the technology, and this is like, I'm very privileged for kind of handling that on the Givaudan side. As you see, so I'm Alex Bastos, based here in Zurich. I'm heading pretty much what we call internally front-end innovation. And for us, going on the definition is really about emerging technologies and emerging companies. We came up with this kind of a little bit of aha moment on our side. We were very much, in the past, very secretive about everything we were doing. The flavor industry, of course, very protective. We were doing R&D heavily by ourselves. But then we came up with this, like, there are brilliant minds out there. We started to see some things that we were not even imagining. And we say, we got to be more like explorers. We've got to go out there. We got to work with other people. We got to work with other innovators and make sure that we actually, impact this world together. We also realized that, invention is one thing, the technology is one thing, but the whole ecosystem to adopt that innovation is actually, very, very important. And we know that we are part of that ecosystem to bring this innovation into the, to the consumers. So that's what I'm doing here for the Taste and Wellbeing division of Givaudan, or the food side of Givaudan. As Suzanne said, we've been there for some time, more than 250 years of history. And I guess, we have done a great job, since then, and it's great. So that's me, that's Givaudan. The trends that I will call out now, they are very much related to, let's say, Givaudan. For the ones that don't know, we are B2B food ingredient company. Actually, between us here, we don't like, others to call us food ingredient, because everything we do is really designed for your country, for your consumer, for your formulation. So it's not just like a catalog. The other day, someone asked me, can you send your catalog, Alex? I say, it's going to be very long catalog. So we design solutions. We design, really a food solution that would fit your own needs, and that's what we do on the food side. So the things that I'll talk about in terms of trends, what we have seen in the past, and what I personally see coming now and in the future, will be related to that space, right? More into the product itself, the food we eat, and Givaudan is all about this experience at the end, right? That's our mission in life. We want to make sure that the consumer will have a great taste experience, a great mouthfeel experience, a great, sight appearance experience with the product. So we are all about that, and to make sure that everything comes together so that the consumer is happy and healthy at the end. So the trends in the past, and some of them they were mentioned here, the clean label, it's not now. I mean, they came already a few years ago. And I like to call more like it's really about transparency, right? Like when the consumers read something, they don't know what that means. They have a challenge with that. So the clean or clear label is something that came already a few years ago, together with like the naturality part. And even if you go back to the Givaudan, news from the past, 5 to 10 years, you see a lot of acquisition in that space, because we are definitely founded in that naturality space. And of course, like sustainability is growing more and more, but these are the trends that are pushing us from the past, and they are still there. The ones I see going on in the future, and some of you mentioned that as well, we are even trying to tag that in a different way. We were talking about alternative protein, and more we've been hearing like sustainable protein, right? Something that is there and can stay, and it's also good for the environment in every single dimension. And in that, of course, we have the plant-based, and I do believe that as we move forward, this space is gonna improve more and more. So before, as you said, we had the minced meats, and we had the pieces and all of that, and now we're talking about whole cuts. I mentioned the other day that food is like a Lego, right? It's a perfect Lego, and the consumer like that, and they love that. And what's happening now is that people are removing like key pieces on that Lego, and then all of a sudden everything changes. And we love this, right? And we are removing for the right reasons and trying to create new, blocks and put them into place so that everything goes well at the end for the consumer. So I think the sustainable protein is a big one. Plant-based, cellular agriculture. We are opening this culture food innovation hub here with Migros and Bühler. It will come next year. So we definitely believe it's a big bet from our side. It's a space that needs to evolve, but it's something we believe. Together with that, the whole fermentation, precision fermentation, biomass fermentation, we think that this is going to evolve more and more. We see great things coming up. Aquaculture is one of them. And this is something that we truly believe. Again, as you remove Legos and you try to create new ones, you definitely need new tools to create them and to put them into place. So fermentation is another big one for us. I also want to call out like upcycling or side stream valorization. I love this, and I have seen some companies, and here, I call out the name because I think they are doing an amazing job. AB InBev, working on that upcycling and looking at their side streams and bringing them back as source for creating new food. So this is amazing, and I think there's a lot happening. It's also another one we definitely believe and we bet on. What else? So it's so many trends. I think I call 3 more. One is on the digital side, and is everything around what I would call the AI food design. You see things like this, for instance, with Notco, and it's amazing to look at that company. I have great admiration for those guys. They started as like a AI digital IT company, bringing like a new way to formulate. And as many of you know, you could promote that as a service to a company, but until they pick up, what, I'm going to launch my own product. Well, they did. Their product is great. And now they completely, focus on, launching more and more products. But what's behind is this amazing Giuseppe, tool that can create this amazing formulations, plant-based. And this is, to me, just the beginning. You see on the recipes, you see on the formulation where the consumers are going, how to create new ingredients, how to use that for fermentation, how to discover even new compounds and new plants, things like that we see other companies doing as well. So I think the AI part for food is just beginning. Then the last two for me is food for health. This is a big one, and it's gonna, keep increasing, especially in these times now that we see people expect more than just like the macronutrients. They expect immunity, they expect gut health, they expect brain health, bone health, everything you can imagine from the food that they eat every day. So precise nutrition is in that bucket. And my last one that I'm in love is affordable nutrition. I think this is going to be a big topic going forward. Sorry, I hope I stayed with my 5 minutes, but it's a lot to talk. And thank you very much, Suzanne and Regina.
Thank you, Alexander. Maybe we can have the intro from Derek. Also, what is your role at Blue Horizon? What do you see in the food trends from the past and in the upcoming years? Thank you.
Sure. First of all, thank you for the invite. Always happy to help kickstart in this amazing ecosystem you guys have. I'm Derek. I'm part of the investment team here at Blue Horizon. I've been here since 2019, but Blue Horizon has been around since 2016. We are a food tech investment firm. We're based here in Switzerland, in Zurich, actually, but we invest globally. Currently, most of our focus is on Europe and US. And our mission here is to accelerate the transition to a sustainable food system. So, most of the technologies that we focus are being discussed here today: alternative proteins, plant-based foods, fermentation technologies, cell-based meat. We also go a bit more upstream side because we also have to take care about agriculture. So we look at crop protection systems, seed genetics, how to make it more efficient, and other enabling technologies in the food system. Today, we have over 60 investments in food tech of companies in various stages. So from seeds to growth stage, we can do different investment sizes. The idea is to kind of be a one-stop shop for entrepreneurs when they're scientists of an idea until they're raising their 100 or 500 million round. And why we do that? There are three main motivations for us. One is environment. I think, most people here know food is responsible for more than 1/4 of our GHG emissions nowadays. Also health part. We think there's a lot to improve in terms of health in our diets, and also animal welfare. We think it's super important. Nowadays we kill 10 times the human population in animals every year. And with regards to the trends that we see in the market that we have seen in the past 5 years, I think the main trend, I'm biased, of course, but the main trend was the rise of the second generation plant-based products. So mainly the products really trying to mimic the experience of eating meat, and catering really to the meat eaters who are actively looking to reduce their meat intake. So what we call the flexitarians. And you see a lot of products that were a huge success. We see Beyond Meat, we see Impossible Foods in the US. And we really, think these companies are amazing. And but I think there's also an ongoing trend for making products which are more differentiated and have the whole cut aspect and really mimic not only the experience and the taste, but also the nutrition part. And there are companies really focusing on that. So we as a fund, we're kind of investing in companies that we believe that are going to be in the forefront for the next 10 years. So we look pretty much at companies which are looking at more clean label products and are really focusing on the forefront of mimicking the meat experience. So on the structure side, companies that are using new sustainable ingredients. So most of the plant-based products nowadays, they use soy, they use wheat, and they use pea. But I mean, there are so many different types of proteins coming on the market. There's algae protein, there are fermented proteins, fermented ingredients. There are other crops which we're starting to process in a different way to get different proteins for different purposes. So we have chickpea, we have canola, we have fungi. I mean, there are companies using fungi for many different reasons. So that's our main investment focus here. We also see a big trend going forward of personalized nutrition and food as medicine. I mean, as we see nowadays, you can do a DNA test for $100 or $150, and you can see a lot of that impact on your health and how food impacts your health and what are your predispositions in terms of food. So, I mean, with the cost of the test going down, we see more and more this personalized nutrition trend really taking off. And people, I mean, with the increased health awareness, people just going for functional food that provides them with more energy or different health aspects. So those would be, I think, the main trends that we're focusing for the next 5 years, 5 or 10 years.
Thank you. Perfect. And then last but not less important, Ingeborg, please go ahead.
Yes, happy to do that. I need to check the quality with you because I have only 2 bars out of 4 here. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, we hear you well. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, tell me when that stops. Well, hi everyone. So cool to be here. I'm Ingeborg. I have been with Kickstart as a mentor and advisor for 3 years now, I believe. 4th year. And yeah, I'm on the board of food companies where I serve as a board member. One of them is 100 years old and 2 of them are very young, 4 years old and 0 years old, which is loads of fun. I think you invited me here today in another role, which is as a director of the Founder Institute. I serve as a director at the Founder Institute Switzerland, as well as a new vertical that we've just started in Founder Institute, which is called Global Food Ecosystems. We were hoping to find a really long name that makes for a very complicated URL. So we came up with Global Food Ecosystems. What it really does is it's trying to help food tech founders all over the world, which is a very new venture for Founder Institute. Founder Institute, just for your info, is normally organized in city chapters where, you know, every city runs their own chapter. It's a pre-seed accelerator, so very different from Kickstart. Participants in Kickstart, they already have a business going, they already have a product fully developed, they're probably already generating some revenue here and there. And Founder Institute does something completely different. We are here for very early stage founders. So people who want to become entrepreneurs, people who want to leave their current job and, you know, start their own company. Maybe they have an idea, maybe they have a very early product, and maybe they don't. And this is where they learn how to get from 0 to traction. And it's actually not about learning, it's about doing. So it's a program that gets you from 0 to traction. But, you know, I think it's a lot more helpful for you guys in the audience to hear about trends than about what we do. And when it comes to trends, look, I've had 26 years in corporate food, and I've seen firsthand how things change and how people don't see them change. So I'm getting an echo right now. Yeah, that's gone. Good. And because I don't think we're witnessing trends at the moment in food. I think what we are witnessing is a seismic change of people's relationship with food, the way, what we eat, why we eat it, how and when and where we eat it, and even how we define ourselves in our relationship to food. And I think that awareness is still not broad enough. Maybe among food tech startups, yes. Maybe among visionary investors, maybe. But generally, people just go like, the basics of food are never going to change. We are always going to want to sit around a table and enjoy a warm cooked meal together. And, pleasure will always trump health because that's how people tick. That's how humans are. And, my personal assessment of that is basically that's bullshit. That is not true. And the reason why we believe this is it's human nature to resist change. It's human nature to not believe that things are changing. But also, we are too young. We have not witnessed the Industrial Revolution. 1850s, kind of. If we had been around in the 1850s, we would believe that a seismic change is possible because the Industrial Revolution was a complete fundamental change of food. I don't want to go into details of what food looked like before the Industrial Revolution because, it was just absolutely terrible and it was completely different from what we have grown up with. And what's happening now is an equally seismic shift. And it's just important to open our eyes to that. From a food industry point of view, when you're the maker of consumer packaged goods, as we like to call food sometimes, when you're the maker, you think like, these trends. It's like everything's natural and everything's now back to the roots and everything's without artificial ingredients and it's made by people around the corner and it's personal and local and natural and real and so on and so on and so on. But that's just a niche and it's just a bit of this back to the roots trend. And that is just not true. I think what's happening is a systemic change. It's a systemic change, and just like the Industrial Revolution, it's not just about people, cooking up something in their kitchens and it's so good. It's not like that. It's enabled by technology. Derek mentioned some of the things that I believe will shape that seismic shift. On the one hand, it is, of course, a reconnection with nature, a reconsideration maybe of ancient wisdoms and, other ways of eating, respect for nature, respect for animals, and so on. That's one aspect. But the other aspect is deep tech. It's the discovery of our personal microbiome and the analysis. We are able to analyze our microbiome, and we are only beginning to understand how much that drives our health, our longevity, life and death, really, and precision fermentation, and reading human DNA, and so on, and so on, and so on, and being able to replicate food from cells. So those, I believe, are the technologies that will drive the revolution of food that we're witnessing. And this is what I would, and here I'm going with Founder Institute again, because I think, and Founder Institute believes that in order to save the big challenges that humanity is facing, we need entrepreneurs, because nobody else moves fast enough to solve those problems before it's too late. Microbiome, precision fermentation, precision farming, reading the human genome, and of course, all of that supported by machine learning in many cases. And, I can only ask anyone who has any bearing on the innovation ecosystem in any country, including Switzerland, to support the startups that are changing the world, either with money or with advice or with your network or whatever. Because if we don't support them, then who is going to bring about the fundamental shift that we need in order to, you know, change a system that is otherwise going to kill us all? So it's kind of what I'm trying to say is we're not discussing trends. We're discussing a massive fundamental shift, and you're either on it or you're not.
Thank you, Ingeborg. And I know we have a few questions prepared, but thank you so much for that. And I fully agree. I just wanted to sort of jump in, and we are a little bit, and Regina and I are part of this, obviously. We are a little in this, I always call it a bubble, where you're in a food tech bubble and you're very passionate about what you do. And you meet people who see this systemic change happening and who see all these things. And the difficult part, for me at least, is when I speak to people outside of this bubble, of which there are still plenty. So in the sense of, you know, the general public and the ordinary consumer, let's call them, how do you see the acceptance of, you know, new technology, but particularly deep tech, things like, you know, cellular agriculture, which is still, it's a very sort of abstract concept for a lot of people out there. What do you mean my steak was grown in a lab? What do you mean it was 3D printed? How is that possible? It's, you know, artificial. I don't want that. I want my steak to come from a cow because the cow was outside in the field, which it wasn't, obviously. But this is the romantic side of food production that people still think about on a daily basis, right? So how do you see that consumer acceptance evolving in the next few years of all of these new technologies that are developing at an accelerated pace right now and probably will continue?
Well, you know, I can tell you what I think about that. And again, if we find it hard to wrap our minds around the future, it's sometimes really useful to look in the past. When the railroad was introduced in 1950, most people thought that it was associated with the devil. They thought that the human body was not capable of going at a speed beyond 40 miles per hour. And they thought that human organs would fly out if a human body was moved at that speed, especially for women. That's what people thought about the railroad. So, you know, what do I think people will think about cellular agriculture in 100 years? It's more or less what they think about the railroad today, old news. And I mean, I know I'm a little bit provocative, but I don't think it's helpful when we deal with change and we have to save the planet. I don't think it's helpful to get comfortable in old truths and, you know, some things that will never change. I think it's much more helpful to throw yourself out there and imagine radical scenarios and get comfortable with them. And this is exactly how it will happen. You will go measure your microbiome, you will analyze your DNA, and you will get the food precision fermented for you personally, personalized nutrition, right? For you personally, that will make you healthier. You as an individual, that will keep you healthy. And, you know, I'm not so much into immortality, like, you know, people say that we could live to be 200. I'm not sure if that's desirable. But what about better lives? What about, you know, lives where we can spend our energy on other stuff and not on our health? And what about spending our public money on other stuff and not just on counteracting the effects of our unhealthy diet? So yeah, that's what I think about consumer resistance. On a more pragmatic note, I think that cost and taste are the two factors that will get people around to this.
Thank you so much for that. Derek, I saw you nodding. Any insights on your end?
Yeah, I think on the pragmatic side, I think in 10 or 20 years, when people start seeing cultivated meat, for example, on the shelf, I mean, they see for the same price. I don't know if they how the choice will be, but if they see cultivated meat for the same price, it's a bit healthier than animal meat, and it's way more sustainable, and it's the same price and same taste. Why wouldn't they choose that right? I think always there's some pushback on new technologies coming, but I think I think that disappears over time. I think, and new generations are getting more open to innovation and new technologies, and also the sustainability topic. So if you prove to everyone that it's more sustainable, healthier, and it's at the same price and same taste, why not?
Definitely agree.
What about maybe the cost of the producer on this side? Maybe this is also a good reflection that we can see. Maybe Alexander, you can add some on that.
Yeah, well, I fully agree that you know, there will always be like a comparison to what they are used to, right? In terms of cost, in terms of taste. I think the sustainability part is kicking in more and more. But you know, like with that change, just something was coming to my mind just now. You know, a year ago, and here we are talking from the industry side, as I said, like as one of the enablers, you know, to bring about those changes. When we were talking about, just to take that example that we are talking now, the cultured food or cellular agriculture, we were like, no, you know, this is going to take ages, and you know, and we were not really spending too much time. Well, a year from that mindset, we announced that we are going to open a cultured food innovation hub, you know, so we are fully betting into this. So things are moving so fast, and I agree with Ingeborg, like, you know, the mindset we had and the facts that we had at hand at that time, they are changing so fast. So there are still questions about, you know, the cost. There are still questions about how the consumers will look into this. But in 5 years, there will be another consumer base that will look into this different than the way we managers look at it, you know, as a consumer as well. So I think things are moving just very fast, and we see this happening in the corporate world, right? So a year ago, we were not even close to confidence that, you know, this could become price parity at some point in the next 20 years. And again, now we are fully betting and putting like our, you know, our efforts and our capital to create this cultured food innovation hub to actually enable that space. Things are moving very fast, and I believe, you know, that those changes are closer than most of people, you know, think of.
Thank you.
And Alexandre, adding to your point, I mean, on the technical side, of course, there are many hurdles that we have to overcome on the cost side. But at the same time, this is such a new industry. And I mean, this industry is maybe 10 years old. And it's now in the past 5 years that money has started flowing into this industry, and it will only grow in the next 5 or 10 or 15 years. So imagine now having the most brilliant scientists and minds and engineers working on this problem, right? I mean, there are some things that we cannot predict, but the speed of innovation will for sure accelerate over the next years, just because there's so much money flowing, and it's such a global team that we have to handle.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you just said, Derek, and especially on the cost side, because in the end, you know, we should keep in mind that we're comparing an industry, a really, really old industry that has tons of subsidies to reduce, you know, the end price, the retail price for the consumer, to an industry that has just started, that is, you know, just started to scale, and that has not at all yet the economies of scale of, you know, a fully integrated industry like the one of animal protein. And so, you know, if you put that in perspective, you understand that probably it's really just a matter of years until we get to a price parity. And actually, I even think that pretty soon there should be one company launching plant-based alternatives globally, which will have one aim, which is to be cheaper than animal protein, way cheaper, so as to convert people who may not have thought they would one day eat animal protein, plant-based proteins, but at least they will, because it will be so cheap.
So we also have some questions in the audience. Maybe we can take them in, or if they are related to what we are currently talking. For instance, we have one question from Janif. It looks like most innovation is focused on producing more and not all the other side of the coin, which is how to reduce food waste, which is estimated at 1/3 of total food produce. Means reducing this can potentially cover a large portion of the gap in increase of production. How do corporations look at reduction of food waste, which is counterintuitive to them since it means less production and less profits, but on the other hand, much more environmentally correct.
Oh, well, that's easy though, right? Because, I mean, like Alex mentioned as an example of AB InBev, who are making new business out of side streams. This is one of the easy ones because it's actually not counterintuitive. It doesn't mean less production and less profits. It actually means turning something that you would have to dispose of at cost into a valuable ingredient for a new product. I mean, the side stream upcycling and all of that is one of the most intuitively right things to do for corporations, one of those that really pay off for them. So I see a huge future for that. Household food waste is more difficult, of course, because it's so far removed from food corporations, right? But side streams and waste that happens in the production, I think we're beginning to tackle that.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of what Ingeborg said, companies like mine, for example, Aquaculture Foods, we grow our products in sheets, and it is so in stacked trays, and it's able to basically take the form of whatever vessel we're growing our product in. And so right now it's growing in squares, but as we are cutting and forming products like a shrimp, what has that characteristic kind of C shape, we're left with a lot of leftover product. And so rather than disposing of that product, we are taking it and we are repurposing the product to create chunks of maybe crab or lobster, to create crab or lobster cakes, or we're shredding it and to create a form of lobster salad, or we're just using that in many different forms in many different ways. It's a major way that we are creating additional side stream revenue, as Ingeborg was mentioning, is what AB InBev is doing, while simultaneously reducing waste and decreasing our footprint. So I think that a lot of different kind of companies are looking at the same problem from a different way, but I think we're all in a very similar position in that we agree with you that there is a real need to reduce food waste, not only at the corporate level, but in the individual consumer level as well.
Just to maybe add
from my side, so just to say that I have seen a lot actually, from really side streams, or the old story about like ugly fruits or vegetables. We see quite a lot of work happening on those spaces. So we should do more and more. So I agree with the principle that it's an important area, but we see quite a lot of activity, and even here to mention the case of Givaudan. So we were part of this EIT, which is European Institute of Innovation and Technology, with like many startups and corporates, and we came up with this with the help of a startup actually, to actually understand who is producing side streams, who can actually extract the good things from the side streams, and who can buy the extractions or the compounds or the high value ingredients that will come from these side streams. And this is all like managing into like a marketplace. It's a beautiful, beautiful project funded by the the EU.
Okay. I mean, just to go forth on this as well, and maybe to Derek, in the startups that you see, obviously you see loads of them pitching for funding, etc. The theme of, yes, side streams and additional income, sure, but how big is the theme of at the initial stage? How big is the theme of sustainable production with these guys? Is it a focal point asked from the beginning? Because obviously they have the advantage of being a lot more agile and a lot more nimble in moving in that way and incorporating it in the early stages, rather than these big corporate guys who have their production set and are more based on efficiency and cost effectiveness, et cetera, and they have to make a lot of changes to make that a lot more sustainable. What do you see in the startups that you see pitching now to you, just the newer ones? How big of a theme is sustainability already for them?
So I think food waste has been tackled from different angles from the startups that we see. First, there are some ingredient companies, and these ingredient companies, they of course are aware of their side streams and they need to do something with it. And a lot of the companies are trying to tackle that. I've seen like companies in the chickpea space, and they're looking into ways of maybe doing starches and upcycling that into food. I've seen companies as kind of in their business model, as their main business is to actually upcycle the ingredients of different industries. One of them is Kern, that is actually part of Kickstart Accelerator, right? And I mean, they're tackling nuts and seeds and really using some things that we would throw waste nowadays and to make new ingredients out of it. And there's the other side is the consumer and the retailer, and then companies are trying to use technology. There's Too Good To Go, which was launched started in the Nordics, but they're also present here in Switzerland. And it's basically the retailers, they do promotions of things that are about to expire. I think there are many different angles to tackle food waste. It's certainly very challenging. We haven't seen as much investment into the space because I feel that investors still need to see that the business models that are out there work. But it's certainly a big theme for us as investors. We're actively looking for something because, of course, it's 1/3 of the impact in food comes from waste, and why not use that in a more efficient way?
Thank you. Maybe to go back, there was another question from Oliver. How do you see the growing trend towards a vegan diet as part of the Back to Nature movement? And do you perceive this as a threat to cultured food? Now, I know, Martin and Anne, you're not actually working on cultured food. However, maybe one of you or both of you could still give your points of view on this.
Well, I think it's great because we're vegan, so yay. But I think that solving the world's food problem and creating proteins, readily available proteins at a great price that taste delicious, that feed your body nutritiously is a goal, and it's massive. It's a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. And there's room for everybody. There's room for plant-based, fermentation-based, and cell-based, and they're all going to appeal to different customers at different times for different eating experiences. And so I think there's room for many different players, and I really do.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with everything you said. And I would add on that you know, when you look at people who, you know, oppose plant-based meats or cultured meat, for that matter, they're often, you know, not vegans or not even that much back to nature type of consumers. They're actually, you know, consumers that are really reluctant to try new products. They have like this huge neophobia. And so when you look at vegans, you know, they're typically the first ones to you know, to want cultured foods and plant-based meat to have a large, you know, portion of the overall protein market. Which makes sense, right? Because it really is in line with their mission. And that's also why you find so many vegans among the founders of cell-cultured or plant-based companies.
Super. Maybe Ingeborg, you want to add some of your thoughts? You were nodding as well.
Yeah, I was nodding. Those are my thoughts. I mean, most vegan people that I know are vegan because, you know, they want to save the planet and they don't want to harm animals and they want to watch out for their own health in terms of antibiotics, etc. You can achieve all of those goals also with cell-based meat. So I really don't see the from a consumer point of view, I really don't see the competition or the mutual exclusion here. I think they could exist side by side. But if I may be so bold, I think Vivek, in the next question, actually, that is a very relevant question in terms of how do they go together? Because given that plant-based products, as Vivek is asking, have enjoyed a monopoly in alternative protein until now, how do we see them coexist with cell-based and fermentation-based product once the latter have achieved cost parity, right? And probably, you know, as Derek is probably in the best position to take this one because it's really a bet going on right now. What is going to happen to plant-based when fermentation-based, you know, microorganism-based, cell-based are ready for the mainstream market? And just to give you my 5 cents is that I believe that plant-based products have to probably innovate in terms of land use, water use, energy use, food waste. So why not apply precision farming, for example? You know, go high tech on plant-based, on farming would be one idea.
I mean, my view on that is that first, I mean, we're still talking about less than, I mean, roughly 1% of the market. So first, there is still space for the next decades. I would say second, I mean, there is, of course, cell-based meat is way better than animal meat from many different perspectives, especially the environment. But there's the health side as well. And if we take the nutrition guidelines for many country health associations, and we take the current, let's take red meat as an example, and the red meat intake from the average European or American red meat intake, it's roughly 3 times what we should be eating of red meat. So if people are, I mean, people our view is that people are increasingly concerned about the health and the impact of diet on health. So people in Western countries, especially, they need to reduce their meat intake anyways. And if they can do part with cultivated meat, it's good, even when it reaches price parity. But also they need to reduce red meat intake anyway. So and part of it can be substituted by plant-based meat. And there's also another part of it. I mean, meat hasn't changed over the years or centuries. And plant-based is just starting and still evolving. And there are so many experiences and tastes that you can create with it. And you don't need to mimic meat and try to do 100% equal to that. You can do better than that for many different taste profiles. So you can create so much out of it. And I think that's something that will happen over the years, is that it will be less attached to the meat experience, because and more like, okay, let's try this new product which is totally different and has a different taste and it's better for you, just try it, you know, and people will be more open to that.
I agree, and this is why I like, I'm sure you guys know the Spanish company called Hera. They don't call themselves a meat alternative. They call themselves meat successors, which I find just like it's a really good marketing pun as well. But yeah, great viewpoints. Our lovely colleague Tiziano, what is the relationship between the forward-driven nutrition innovation, so the ones illustrated by Ingeborg, and the current status of laws and regulations, particularly then probably Europe-based, for example, farm to fork from the European Commission, let's say?
Who wants to?
I guess the relationship, I mean, I think Alex probably knows more about this than I do, because I really don't have to bother about all of that in my current roles. But I think the relationship is probably a bit of a sad one, right? Because, I mean, you've got to understand governments, right? They have to keep us safe. And the passing of laws and regulations is ever so lengthy and tedious. I mean, look at my home country, Switzerland. It's like taking forever, isn't it? And this is democracy. So maybe, I think what might be happening in the future, which is pure speculation, is that there will be a certain level of competition between governments. You can already see Singapore and Saudi Arabia building spaces where, you know, you can be more liberal with regulation and food laws and all of that, and testing cycles. Depending on how that goes, it might put pressure on other people to also become a little more liberal, or at least pragmatic in terms of how they protect consumers from harm. But like I said, I'm not an expert in this.
Alexandra, maybe you would like to add? I remember from my last visit that you mentioned you guys have a fantastic regulatory team. So I'm sure you have some additions on this point.
Yeah, I can contribute more as someone who is observing this, you know, a little closer. Of course, like our regulatory team can give a more, you know, informed answer here. But you know, there is this I think this aspect of a competition. We see this happening already, and we see, like, you know, some of the companies flocking to Singapore because, you know, there was this. And it was not like a full openness, you know, like to actually do the products there. It was really exceptional and very, you know, targeted to the products, you know, that the company was launching there. But then you see that other countries are also kind of observing this and trying to accelerate. One thing I always say, and this I always get, you know, from our regulatory team, also on, imagine us, you know, and all the startups that come here, and many of them, they are not approved yet. And we are, you know, we have to follow those procedures to make sure that it's safe for us to experience the product. And I always tell them there are 4 levels. You know, can I see the product? Of course, we can always see the product. Can we smell the product? Can we taste and speak the product? Can we taste and swallow? And we follow very much what our guys internally tell us what we can do. And it's great that there are agencies out there that are taking care of the population and making sure that, you know, once the food is approved, it's safe. There are things that can be improved for sure. You know, today we already have this timeline of 2 years, right? When something needs to go through that process, it takes quite a lot of time. So we need to be reasonable there. I think we can be more practical. We can accelerate, you know, when the need comes, this will be accelerated. And there is a lot of discussion, you know, people are using now even like the, you know, the vaccines for COVID as a way, you know, the world needed that. And then, you know, there was an acceleration process to do this as well. But we have to make sure that at the end, you know, safety is very much like foundational to all we do and to everything we do around food.
Perfect. Maybe to come into, maybe coming back to this point, maybe you mentioned about safety, but also what will be this is your thought from Jovadan, but what could be the impression from other countries at European level or at globally? What do you see that those are the trends, or what is the improvement on the food industry that could be in the next years that you could see? Not only in Switzerland, but in other countries, like Ingeborg mentioned, Singapore is advancing, and yeah.
Well, we hope actually, talking about Switzerland, and the quote unquote advantage of not being part of, EU, that they could be more independent on taking some of those decisions. And Switzerland is seen in many ways for many things as like a good market to try, and to, a pioneer innovation. So could be one way. That's what I personally expect, that, in Switzerland we see more, maybe in UK, as, given the conditions now. EU is very robust in terms of regulatory. So we actually see most of the companies going more to the US because they have more flexibility there to launch products. EFSA, which is the agency here, is very tight, is very difficult. And I'm not sure personally, again, that it can change. I think probably, US will advance more, and we'll see these competitions between these countries like Singapore, Switzerland, on other countries as well that can try to accelerate there and attract innovation. But still, the market is where the market is, right? So North America is the biggest market together with Europe. So still the startups need to do that. I mean, take the example of Israel, where they also have like a very strong, regulation procedures as well. But if they open up there, it's still like a limited market in terms of opportunities. So the startups, the first thing that the founders do in Israel is like travel, right? So they have to go out. So the market is where the market is. I think US, they already, again, we've been talking about cellular agriculture. They already send some signals that they will be somehow maybe more flexible to this. We saw this in precision fermentation cases like Perfect Days in the market, right? Interesting labeling, right? Like non-animal whey protein. So when you think about the consumer reading that label, like, okay, but in principle, whey protein is animal, but how come? So, but this is there, right? It's happening. And I think US will probably have, some more contribution to accelerate that process. That's my personal view. And we see that happening already.
Okay, we can continue with the discussion. We can also add on and take the next question if you want. Next one is Sid. Changing food will indeed mean an ongoing shift in the consumer mindset. More education and transparency are needed. Product labels, ingredients, impact on health. Do you expect governments to help with this education, shortening of supply chains and transparency, or do you expect this to come from a startup private sector, or both? Maybe who would like to add some comments?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the railroads again, and I was wondering what the role of the government was at that time. But again, I wasn't there. So, I mean, governments are important players, and many of them are trying to be helpful, but we can't rely on them to make change. Is that really their job? I mean, honestly, what do we elect these people for? Do we elect them to make change or to keep us safe? And that's their job, to keep us safe. I think change drivers have to come from somewhere else. And I think what governments can do is to help it along, to be good shepherds and, put the hurdles out of the way. But they will not shorten the supply chains. The best they can do is not stand in the way, which, by the way, Bob Dylan said in his song, "The Times, They Are Changing." Senators, congressmen, etc., don't stand in the way of change, which is the best that people can do.
Maybe this also could be in towards sustainability approaches, what the governments can also take part of, if they do go.
I would maybe add one thing on what Ingeborg said, which is that I do believe that governments have a huge role to play in what companies are allowed to display and advertise to the consumer, right? Because if they don't, well, companies, they just show whatever they want, right? So typically, when you look at CO2 emissions that companies claim they are producing, or when you look at many other aspects, there is a lot of greenwashing that is possible currently, and governments have a huge role to play in making sure that the consumer is not being fooled by businesses, right? And even when you look at nutritionals, for instance, or composition ingredient lists, currently there is a lot that can be hidden and that the consumer won't see, and that would still fit right in the current legislations. And so I do believe that change won't happen through governments, but on specific aspects, and specifically on consumer information and transparency, they have a very important role to play.
And then to add a little bit more to what both Martin and Ingeborg were saying, I feel that where it really starts is very ground level is with startups finding the opportunity to create real disruptive innovation. And I think that starts, it finds a problem, finds a way to solve that problem, brings it to market, grows to the point where larger companies are then getting in and bringing it further and helping along customer education, increased demand, understanding of what more and more needs are. And then I feel like the governments get into place to make sure that the health and safety is always on the forefront. So I think it typically starts with just identifying the need, solving that need, getting the product out there, growing it, and then government comes in to make sure that everything is safe for the individuals as a whole. But I think that I think that there is a need for everybody in this place to kind of come together. I think that in a perfect world, the government would be a little bit more active in providing government grants to further the kind of science that is going to be needed in order to make the most impactful change. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I know that it's starting to. There was recently some governmental funding came in for cell-based. For the U.S. funded some cell-based science research at the university level. I think it was a $10 million grant. So we are seeing this start to happen. I think that it's going to increase, but I think that right now it's up to the private sector to get it where it needs to be.
Thank you so much, Anne, for your addition. I was about to ask, how did you experience this in the US? Has the government stood in your way in that sense?
It definitely has not stood in our way. Everything that we're doing, everything that we're doing is we're fully expecting to achieve a pre-1958 exemption with GRAS, which is our US version of novel foods. But it has to be there because otherwise, what is to prevent somebody from creating a potentially harmful or toxic product and bringing it to market. So government regulations have to be in place in order to keep everybody healthy, in order to make sure that corporations are running toxicity tests needed. They just have to be there. It has its place. But I think that when it comes to disrupting the status quo that has historically fallen on disruptive startups, and I think that that's probably how it's going to be for quite some time. But I think that everybody is identifying a massive issue that needs to be changed, and that's why alternative protein has really taken the center stage spotlight that it has globally, and I think it will continue to do so. And I think that government, startups, large corporations are all going to be working together more and more in order to make the change necessary.
Totally agree. Maybe we can go to, and I think that we have about 8 minutes left, so let's maybe make this the last question, unless there are more in the chat coming up, but I think this might be the last one. So from Elisa, nice to see you here. She's from one of our startups in the Kickstart final batch this year as well. So allergies in general are on the rise. Generally, processed foods and pesticides are seen as a potential cause. At least that's what I frequently read and my doctors tell me. How do you see the development to a more healthy and not processed nutrition? I think that we touched on this a little bit at the beginning in terms of, more clean label, a lot of the, initial plant-based products. This is the comment that a lot of the Impossible Foods and the Beyond Meats of this world obviously get as a comment. It's overly processed, etc. So maybe Derek, maybe you can start with this one in terms of your views on this.
Yeah, well, I mean, we think that going forward, that is going to be more key over time to have less and less ingredients. That's the trend where we see like earlier stage startups, they're focusing on having less and less ingredients. They know how important that is to consumers who are looking to transition from meat to plant-based products. And I mean, we see in the fermentation space a lot of companies, they put 1 or 2 ingredients, they ferment it, and they get a full product out of it. Maybe they put some flavorings, which are natural sometimes. So I think it's in the minds of most of the startups, at least in the alternative protein space. And I think we'll see a lot of innovation in there in the next 10 years. I think that has not been much of the focus until now, more because companies were trying to mimic taste with the technologies they had until now. And they got pretty close to that. They still need to get better in taste, but I mean, we all know that we have to improve on the nutrition side as well. It doesn't people don't want only the experience, but they want the health aspect as well.
Totally agree. Martin, you look like you have something to add. Go ahead.
Yeah. Actually, I was thinking, the main issue with transparency around nutrition and food processing currently is that companies, they only have to show a certain number of information on their packaging. So typically there are certain ingredients which you might add and which will disappear during your process, and they don't have to show in your ingredient list. There can be you have no information whatsoever on the type of process that you're using to create your foods. You have nutritional values on your label, but many of them are missing, right? And typically when you look at plant-based alternatives, it'd be really interesting not only to have the protein content, but at least to have the iron content, if not the B12 content. So and that's really where I think that, as I said previously, states and governments have a big role to play, so as to make sure that not only these pieces of information are displayed, but also they are displayed in a very understandable way, right? Because not every consumer holds a BS or a master's degree or a PhD in nutrition or food science, and it can be really tough to actually understand what's happening behind the scenes. So typically initiatives like the Nutri-Score here in France, I think were excellent initiatives to increase the level of transparency and help the consumer understand what's actually inside the product. But I think we can do much more than just that.
Thank you. Alexandra, how do you see this from, particularly, obviously you do a lot with ingredients, flavors, fragrances, all of these. How do you see this evolving?
Yeah, I go back to my Lego analogy, right? So people, if I can make it in a very simplistic way, right? So people change one brick from the animal protein to like the plant-based protein. But then now when they try to put the brick back, they go after what's available in the industry. So then it's all the, the different names that the consumer don't understand, and maybe artificials and things that are, more processed than the others. And that was the only way to actually bring a product to market at this stage. Either, I could wait and do every single brick myself, which actually we see a little bit that happen in the cellular agriculture. But on the plant-based, the company said, okay, that's what we have, let's go with that. The good thing is that, the consumer sort of, say, okay, I can take it, then there is a discussion now, okay, but now it's, before I had meat in my ingredient list, and now it's a lot of things and many things I don't understand. So what I truly hope is that, as the time goes by and people start to realize, say, hey, we have to remove some other bricks and bring alternatives to them that are also less processed and, healthier, and that the consumer understand. So someone talk about gums, someone talk about methicellulose, like all these discussions are there now. Can we have another brick, to bring it back and make it, more transparent to the consumer? And that's where I think, and I hope that let's say the plant-based, products, will evolve. And then some of these things that are in there that they are not perceived as, good for the consumer for different reasons, that, you can bring back like things that can do the same job and be better perceived by them. So it's to me some of the next challenges, and everybody knows in the industry, probably Martin, I guess you don't have that issue already. You fix that through like the process, which is another way, and it's great to have that. But many companies are, is there an alternative, not to the protein anymore that we found, but alternative to XYZ, because we don't have them. So that would be my view on that.
Yeah, and I think Anne, you mentioned this earlier on as well, that with your product it's basically flavorless at the base, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your product is incredibly pure as well. There are very few ingredients, so you're on the right track there. On that note, I think we have 1 minute left. So on that note, I'd like to thank all of you very much for being here today. I think it was a very great discussion with very valuable insights. So thank you very much again for your time and for your input here today. Also, everyone who came in as a viewer, I hope you found it interesting. And then, I would like to wish everyone a very nice rest of your evening, rest of your day, rest of your week. And see you soon, hopefully. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you,
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye-bye.